Welcome back to the Akashic Almanac Guidance from Within podcast. I am your friend and host, Brittany Woods, bridging the seen and unseen worlds of our reality. Today we talk about the woman behind Shanti Health and Wellness, Lexie Nerger. She is a yoga instructor, Reiki practitioner, and she's starting a new adventure in sound healing. We talk about how this one random day in gym class brought her to yoga, and how getting an astrology reading in India led her to becoming an energy healer. We also talk about how she healed her lower back in a prenatal yoga training. If you like what you hear, please share and subscribe. Lexie Nerger is the amazing woman behind Shanti Health and Wellness. She is a certified yoga and children's yoga instructor. Lexie is also a certified Reiki practitioner to not only help us humans on our healing journey, but is certified in animal communication as well. Lexie's newest yoga adventure is a 32-hour prenatal yoga certification. So, without further ado, hi! Thanks for being on the show today. If you want to start, tell me a little bit about why yoga, how you found yoga, and then how that's kind of led you to be this Reiki practitioner.
When I was young, I remember my dad would do like workout videos. So it was something that I was aware of from an early age, but I didn't really practice until I got into high school. And I was a really active person. Like I was, I would do a few sports. I would do a lot of singing and performing where I felt like I needed to kind of, singers know that you need to work out and have your breath be at its peak. You need your lungs really healthy. So I was very focused on health as a way to kind of support everything that I was trying to accomplish. And I remember in high school we had gym class, and I guess it was like a rainy day or something, and maybe it was the end of the school year, and my gym teacher was just like, half of you could go in and play this game, and the other half of you can go and watch this yoga video. And I remember doing it, and I was just like, this is such a fun way to challenge myself. So I kept on looking for that, and a high schooler who doesn't really have anybody else who's practicing yoga isn't going to go to a studio because I didn't really have money or anything. I wasn't driving. So I basically would go on YouTube, and I started to do the yoga videos from online. And I remember I would have one for every day of the week. I would do arms one day, legs, abs, full body. And it felt like a really complete way to support myself physically. And then I noticed that it was helping with my stress as well, because I was so involved. I was putting a lot of pressure on myself, and it was just a really nice way to have a challenge physically and sometimes emotionally. We're not always up to working out, but it just felt really fulfilling, and it really boosted my confidence, especially because, people who were going to join the military after high school, they were starting, in weight room and gym class, they'd be like, let's do planks. And I could outplank them because I was just so used to pushing myself like that. So I felt like, oh, okay, this is something that's kind of maybe not coming easily to me, but the challenge doesn't feel like I'm hurting myself, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So I just kind of went from there, and I kept going into college. I would be like, all right, well, if I'm in college, then I get free yoga classes. And that was kind of my motivation to stay in school. It was all right, I could take free yoga. I went to community college, and I took 2 semesters, one right after another, of yoga as a course. And the first course was Hatha yoga, which at the time I didn't really understand the differences between all of them. But that was a good one to start with because it was just you're really focusing on the basics. And my teacher was very traditional, and she made me feel like this is a cool way to discipline yourself, because I was up before the sun. When I came out of my class at 7:30 in the morning, or 8 a.m. So I was just starting my day in a really positive place. I felt super accomplished before 9 a.m. I just noticed I had all of this kind of motivation to be there and learn. And I remember my teacher was like, oh, there's somebody here in our class who wants to take her training. And part of me was like a little jealous. And I'm like, how does she become a teacher? How does she know that she wants to do this? And that might have been my little voice in me being like, well, maybe you want to do this, but you're here in college for something else. So I was in school to study psychology. I did want to be a school counselor because when you're in high school, you sit with your guidance counselor to discuss options. And I'm like, well, I spend all my time here. I'm helping like with administrative work. I was like putting stamps on stuff, and like I was really involved in the guidance office, especially because they ran like the anti-bullying committees and like the anti-drug committees. Like they would just do all these things that I really was involved with. So when I would sit down for my meetings with like that high school counselor, I was like, I'll just do what you're doing. And so when I was in school, like in college, I was really struggling, and I was turning to yoga to like help me through kind of like that feeling of depression of like, I came into college to do all these things, and I like being a student, but I'm not enjoying like all of these other aspects of it. There's a lot going on that I really was like struggling with. And I was turning to yoga. So it became more of this like medicine for me. And from there, I was just like, well, let me try one more school. I ended up transferring between three colleges in the span of like 3 years. And I felt really discouraged because my credits were all over the place. Some of them that I paid for at some schools were just not going to transfer to other schools. And I felt like, I wish somebody told me this so I could have avoided all of these issues and all of this wasted money and time. But the loan that I took out for my last semester of college, I ended up using part of that for my down payment, my deposit for the trip for like India for for our training. And I was like, this might be irresponsible, especially because I've never left the country before that. But until then, like I felt like I built nothing. I felt like, I went from being this really driven person to feeling so lost. And this was like this new challenge to go to India was like motivating me. So I just went with it. And then of course we went to India, right? And we met. And that alone was like its own I don't know, it felt like a whole lifetime being there for that 30 days,
Yeah, it felt like a lifetime.
I mean, we processed a lot of different things. So being there and just realizing that, taking myself out of not only like my home situation where a lot of people get to do that by going away to college, I took myself out of the pressure to work and balance that with school. I got to just be a student and just be like in nature whenever we weren't doing schoolwork, and really realizing how my body was changing. And as my body was changing, I was noticing how not just like my physical energy levels were changing, but my emotional energy was changing. And I was having these like wild dreams and like really crazy intuition, like or intuitive moments where we would be done with a really strong practice, have a really deep meditation, and I would get off of that mat and be like, I have to call so-and-so because they need me. And even though like we were like 9 hours difference, like it was like a weird time difference, I did find out that person that I was thinking of in that moment needed me. So then I started to see like this is really pulling me into the alignment of my life, right? Like it's really just keeping me in tune with where I'm supposed to be and how I'm supposed to be helping myself. So I really just wanted to take all of that and just help others with it, because I was like, if I could like kind of renew my own faith and have like a new hope for like this completely different dream that I never had. I never wanted to be, I never ever wanted to be a yoga teacher. You know, maybe I wanted to be an English teacher before I decided to be a school counselor, but I was not growing up like, oh, I want to go go teach people how to, you know, do all these crazy things. And yeah, I kind of just went with it after we left. I was like, I'm just going to see what I can do when I come back to the, you know, the quote unquote real world.
Yeah, that's amazing. First off, no one I've ever heard of took a yoga class in their school gym and then was like, wow, I love this. That's amazing. I always say, I feel like, because I didn't want to teach yoga either. I actually never did yoga before I started doing a free training at my university. So I like never did yoga and then started teaching it. And so I feel like the best way to learn something is to teach it. And I feel like yoga finds you when you're ready. It's not like people seek out yoga. It's like when you're ready to show up for the practice, it finds a way of coming into your life. Um, I also have to say you have tremendous discipline. I think more discipline than anyone I've ever like talked to about this, because to think that you were so young and every day you would show up on your mat and you would do something like whatever you wanted to work on that day. That takes a lot of discipline. I didn't have that. I'll tell you that's true. I still don't have that discipline, but that's amazing. And you mentioned psychology. Like I feel like psychology is huge when it comes to meditation, right? Like there's so many studies through psychology and how the brain reacts to meditation. So it doesn't surprise me that you studied psychology and then you were led to do, you know, a yoga training and meditation and stuff. And I have to say too, I also spent part of my student loans on yoga teacher training.
It's money well spent, right?
Yes, I'm still paying it back, but
Yeah,
it
for sure.
yeah, it was worth it. Also, my first time traveling out of the country. Not first time traveling out of the country, but first time alone. Like being
Yes.
alone. We have so many similarities in our story. This is really funny.
Yeah, and Britt, we were both the youngest ones there. Like I remember we were like, I think you might be a year younger than me.
I just turned 21 the day before I flew out to India.
Okay, and I turned 21 on the 6th. So like within the week of being there.
I remember you were the first birthday.
Yeah, we had like a wave of birthdays. Now, can I ask you a question about that? Sorry, I know you're I know you're interviewing me, but don't you find it interesting that like we spent the first month of our 21st year in like a city with no alcohol?
No alcohol, no meat, no dairy. Like I don't think there was much dairy at all.
There was like yak cheese, but I don't know if I was like, yeah, let me have some of that.
I
Yeah.
know. I wish we could have been in the same group though, like,
Hmm.
but yeah, that is so funny. And now you're off and you're doing such amazing things. And so you have your yoga, your meditation background, and then you were certified to teach yoga for children. And then I'm curious, like what led you to Reiki?
Okay, so when we were in our training, I think you know that I am very interested in astrology, and it's something that I'm like the person who sits and Googles everything. And our teacher, who was our mantra teacher, he was like, I'm going to do, I think they call it Vedic astrology. It's basically, you know, like the Indian version of looking at the chart, because they have different like they had Rahu and Ketu, like they have different, I think I said that maybe not right, but they have different things that they're looking at on the charts. And so I remember a bunch of people got their charts read, and I asked them, you know, what did they say about you? What did they say about you? And they were like saying stuff that they would definitely not say in my life. Like, oh, I'm super close to this family member and I'm going to do this and get all these degrees. And the person I'm dating, I'm going to marry. And I was like, okay, so he's not just saying the same thing to everybody. Mm-hmm. So it kind of filtered out that information. And I went and had a reading with him. And he was like, you're like, now that I've come home with that information, I've looked into it, but he's basically was telling me that the signs in my chart that they rule discipline and routines and long-term work and success. Mine was like all about spirit and energy and intuition, because my Saturn is in Pisces. So I didn't really know exactly what that meant at the time, but he was like, you should get into energy work because yoga is a type of energy work, but he's like, you should do Reiki. And that was like my goal after. I was like, I can do this. I thought it was like some crazy mountain to climb. And I met somebody who was a Reiki master because I was working at an acupuncture office at the time. So we had like a lot of cool people in and out who were into like different traditional medicines and Ayurveda. So that woman ended up running a course in the office, just renting that space. So I took the first 2 courses in like 2 or 3 months apart from each other. And basically what you're doing during that time is getting into such a deep state of meditation on your own, right? Like it's not like someone is doing a trance and you're getting hypnotized out of your consciousness. It's like you learn to put yourself into that deep state where you can receive what they call it like a download, and it's through symbolism. So I started to learn what the symbols are, and it's basically like all through intention. So if you teach somebody what the symbol is and what the intention is, then the power is behind it. Just like when I was growing up learning, all of the symbols of my Catholic religion, we have the cross, we have all these things, and you don't use them lightly because they have meaning behind them. So it was basically the same thing. So for me, I started to understand how it all links together. And it was really cool because the first time you took the course to be like level 1, my teacher was like, you're now meant to use this healing on yourself. And when you do that, when you do any kind of energy work, I'm sure you know this, it feels like you get sick, because we have to like detox energetically from things that we're holding on to. And it might not just be like me as Lexie, but it might be things that, are built in the cells of my body through the memory of my grandparents. It goes that deep. So that alone was like crazy. And then to do it a second time and then be like, wow, I could help people. I went home and I immediately used it on my fiance, and because he had like back issues, headaches, and he's like, I feel heat, I feel energy. And I was like, this is so cool. It was like addicting because to physically feel energy, I feel like it just unlocks a part of my like awareness of, now when I'm in a situation and maybe I'm picking up on other energy, I start to feel it the way I would feel Reiki. And I just find that it's helping me be more in tune to just energy in general, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. And then I do understand what you mean when you say it's like you're detoxing. So the energy work I do is it's called esoteric healing, and actually I think you in the future may be drawn to it just because um you're never going to stop learning, and just for who you are and your discipline, routine, like your spirituality, your intuition, like if in the future you ever wanted to, esoteric healing is also really beautiful and amazing, and I know that you would enjoy learning more about it. Um, but I understand because when you start to heal at a deep soul level, when you start shedding layers that your soul has carried with you through lifetimes or genetically is, embedded in you, yeah, it is like detoxing, and it's transformational, really. It's transformational. And so I completely understand. Yeah.
It's crazy. So after that, I took another course, and it was for, I was like, I want to do animal Reiki. But what I didn't realize is that the course was like 10% Reiki and 90% animal communication. And when I was there, I was like, I have no idea what I'm in for. Um, and it was really, really amazing because we look at people who are maybe like psychics or mediums or whatever people call themselves. Um, and like, it is my belief that we all have that ability, I guess, but some people are just, they're in tune with it. Or maybe some people are using it for good and some people are using it in a selfish way. So I was open to it when I was there, but I did not expect for my intuition to, I guess, work the way that you would think it would work. And so we started by, it's the same thing. It's like meditation. It's like Reiki. You're just clearing your mind, clearing those thoughts, and just observing whatever comes up. So whereas in Reiki, if I'm, let's say, holding my hands over somebody's nose and I start to feel heat, I'm like, okay, I felt heat over your nose. The human will be able to tell me, I'm having issues with snoring, right? But an animal can't do that. So what they were having us do is, instead of getting in touch with feelings, you're getting messages. So for some people, it comes up as something that you could see. And for me, this is just how I've always been with my intuition. It's just like, I think they call it cognizance, or I don't know how to say it, where you just know, like it just pops up and you're like, I don't know why, but this is what I have to tell you. Um, and that's what I noticed during that course. So that was like really cool to get in tune with that and then get some confirmation. So they had like these dogs come in person, and they were like, we want you to tell us about these dogs. And I knew the name of one of the dogs. And I just was like, oh, is this her name? And yep, that's her name. And it was just, it's kind of crazy. And so it kind of makes you think about how we all have this intuition, but how often are we relying on something outside of us to say, okay, you were right, when it's almost like you're discrediting yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
I love when people, it almost makes me sad that we forget how intuitive we are. Like, we are energetic, spiritual, intuitive beings. And it makes me sad to realize how many of us have forgotten that. But it also makes me excited, and I love when people remember, because it's very empowering. It's very empowering to be able to stand in your own will and say, no, this is right. I do see this. Like, this is real. Um, and that's where I feel like science is lacking us a bit, because they can't explain it, even though you know that dog's name and you know what treatment that dog needs.
Mm.
There's no modern scientific explanation for it, but it's intuition. And I think a big part of healing and coming into your own self is honing in on your intuition, honing in on like your abilities to pick up and sense exactly the example you just gave. Yeah. Yeah, I want to ask you, what is like So you do prenatal yoga. That was your newest certification. Is that like your favorite type of yoga class to teach?
Yes. And I haven't even taught that many prenatal students. I've had a few private lessons with friends. But what is amazing to me is that when I came home, this kind of connects back to like the frustrations I had when I came home from India, because we were at such an advanced level of our practice. And then I came home and was teaching beginners because I wasn't
Mhm.
just hired by a studio where I had people coming in who had been doing it forever. I went right to teaching at physical therapy offices and just renting like space from them. And just, I would probably have a few clients, like maybe 5 students a month, like of the same, you know, same kind of people with the same kind of issues. So sometimes it was just like a group of 2 or 3 people, maybe it was just one-on-one. And I was getting really frustrated because I realized how hard it was to teach beginners when you're like, "Oh, just hit downward dog and then go to this." Well, then you have to like explain it, and then it really tests the wording and, how does it feel in somebody's body who hasn't been doing it for over
Mhm.
5 years. So I got really, really, really down because it felt like I came out of, just like I came out of high school with like all these expectations of college. I came out of that training with all of these expectations of myself as a teacher. And as I realized, like, the population that I wanted to teach wasn't what the universe was drawing me to. I loved these physical therapy students so much because doing the smallest movements that I thought was maybe too boring or too simple, it really gave them a freedom of pain. And so I didn't realize that until, I was in physical pain because I got very depressed and I started to associate yoga with work. So I wasn't using it as my medicine anymore. I was like really surrounding my yoga practice with pressure, especially because you go on Instagram and you see all these yoga teachers posting upside down, they're in splits, they're touching their head with their feet. And I wasn't a part of that studio life where I had, a teacher that was pushing me. It was like I was my own teacher. And I felt like my inner teacher was like broken. So it was like building off of that more and more. And, the less I practiced, the more, the weaker my core became. And so your core is connected to your back. It's all, your abdominal muscles are doing the work that your lower back and the top of your glutes are going to take over, basically. So if the abs are really weak, then my back started to do everything. And I ended up getting a mild bulge disc. And I felt like so, so, so ashamed and disappointed. And people would laugh like, how is my yoga teacher in a back brace? How is she not able to bend over? I couldn't do child's pose because it would strain the lower back muscles. So I really struggled with like, how do I keep this profession going that I was pulled to, and now I can't even physically do it? And then I went to my prenatal course because that was always a huge goal for me as a person too. Like I knew that I wanted to learn for my own future pregnancies, to learn what's safe and what's not. Because some of the breaths are good for blood pressure levels and some of them aren't. And I knew that stuff like that changed for pregnant women. So I wanted to be aware of that so I didn't have someone come to class and like pass out or, tear something. Because I would have once in a while a pregnant woman come in. And I was just like, let me like be confident in that situation because this is my strongest yet most delicate student. And I don't even like to call pregnant women delicate. They are very strong, but there's a lot that could go on through a yoga practice that could go counterproductive. So through that prenatal course, I was learning that at the beginning of the week, it was only 5 days long. The first 3 days, I wore my brace and I would take 2 Advil a day, which is like not like me. I'm not like the, let me take a pill and make it better, but I was in so much pain. To the point where I was feeling it in my legs. I couldn't drive and like turn my body to like look in my blind spot. It was really affecting my life. And by the end of the course, I had no brace, was not taking Advil, and I felt so, so good. And I was like, there's something about this practice that I loved. And it was, one, how you speak to prenatal students. We don't just assume that they know the poses like some yoga places do or some studios do, because most of these women are just like told by their physicians, try yoga, or now you have sciatica or sciatic pain, now you should try yoga. They've never done it before this. So you have to really explain, this is where your hands go, this is where your knees go, and now you're in tabletop, instead of saying, this is the pose, right? And so it really transformed like how I was communicating to students, which I loved because it helped transform my relationship to my beginner students. And it was healing me because I was learning how to be strong. Just like a pregnant woman, you can still build strength without hurting the lower back. So I just like fell in love with it. And it's still stuff that I do today because it's such a gentle way to get in tune with the body, to lightly build strength. And we talked a lot about connecting to the child within, not just the child that they are growing, but, your inner child. So we did so much work and I felt so renewed after that. And yeah, I'm so in love with like teaching prenatal.
Talk about divine timing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's like you went to this training with almost like if you were like 7 or 8 months pregnant, right? Like you were limited to what you can do. So you did this training limited in what you could do, like if you were pregnant just because of your back. Like that's, yeah, the timing of that I think is just divine. And thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing that because you're right. Like I understand what it feels like to have a physical ailment and yet you're teaching other people to get better. And so it's kind of contradicting, it feels like, but no one is like everyone's going to go through stuff, right? Like everyone's going to go through pain and growth and change, and even yoga instructors are subject to the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I wanted to touch on, before we go today, I wanted to touch on your work with sound healing. And I think we need to mention that you grew up being a singer and using your voice to do what you love, right? Like for others to listen to you sing, for entertainment, for beauty, for um, just holding your heart and being able to have this beautiful practice of singing for others. And now you're working with sound healing. So there are no coincidences to me. And I just want to ask you, like, just share a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So this is like something that makes me very emotional because I was like always singing when I was really young. Um, that was like our family's way of bonding. And I went into choir in, my church community, and it really helped like build confidence. And so in middle school, we had like our very first, like the school itself had its first musical, and I was a part of it, and it was like, whoa, like changed the game. Like it was just so insane how like someone like, someone could play an instrument and we give credit to the instrument for sounding beautiful. But when somebody sings, I mean, the sound is coming out of their face. It's such a
Mhm.
vulnerable experience. Um, and so when I went into high school, I was obviously going through like emotional times. And I noticed how, you know, if I was in one mood and I started singing, it was like this release and I couldn't help but cry. And it was like a little overwhelming sometimes because I'm like, I wish I could just get this cry out before. Like, I wish I had that space to release the emotions before I would go out and sing because, you don't
Mhm.
want to be sitting there struggling to breathe because you're crying. But looking back, I'm like, that was a type of healing. Um,
Mhm.
and then I didn't want to become competitive with it. Like people would be like, why don't you just go down this avenue in college or at least try to join an extracurricular? And I just felt like I don't want to compete with this because I don't want to ruin it. I'm not competitive. I'm like, if these people are going to sing because they need to pay the bills, let them do that. I can't do that because I was like, I knew how physically like taxing it could be to try to keep your voice in top shape all the time because it's affected by your whole physical body, your energy, your emotions. So I kind of just like let it go for a little bit. Um, and then I realized, time went on and I'm like sad. I'm really not feeding that part of me that loves to be creative through singing. So it was just like this thing like, how do you get back into it without being like, hey, I'm gonna be a professional singer. It's kind of funny to like have a hobby and just not try to make money off of it because I feel like that's how our our society likes to tell us. If you're
Mhm.
good at something, you should do it, and it'll be like your life's work. But
Mhm.
it was so dear to me. So I was like, I can't do that. I can't let anything like possibly ruin it. So I did notice when we were in India, like I was singing all the time. I felt so good and I felt so confident and clear and just felt more like myself. So, time goes on and then I'm like, well, how can I keep singing? And then oh, it's funny because the sound healing that I was doing without singing was like in my customer service job because I remember learning like, if you bring your intention to your heart space and then you speak to somebody, you have the potential to send a vibration of love to them. And just like if I sit here and pluck one string on a guitar and you have a guitar, that one chord that I play will vibrate on the guitar next to it. So I was like, I can do that with humans too. I can speak from a place of love. If someone comes in with like the idea that they're going to fight with me because I had to cancel their appointment or whatever, people they really like to beat up customer service people. And
Mhm.
I remember seeing it in action. Like I would change the conversation, not by manipulating it or saying, you should really calm down, but just by speaking to them and being like, I totally understand. But the tone of my voice was something that started to resonate in them. And they didn't even realize it until they were like, wow, I feel so much better. And so now I'm like starting to just bring that um, into my personal yoga practice. I'm starting to feel more confident with mantras and doing om, like just saying om. Because
Mhm.
when you live with other people who aren't doing stuff like that or are judging stuff like that, it's so weird. It's like you feel very feel very uncomfortable. Um, so it was nice to learn it all in India, where I was like kind of with like-minded people. But when I came home, I was like, people are coming to my classes for physical ailments, and they don't want to deal with this spiritual stuff. But now that time has gone on, I realize that they get that no matter what. Like, if they're open to it, they're going to have a spiritual experience. And I've had people
Mhm.
say that. Even people saying, "Wow, the tone of your voice like is so calming." And well, during class it is. I always make the joke like, yeah, my family does not think that they do not agree that the tone of my voice is that calming. But yeah, people, they will notice it whether you're singing or whether you're speaking it. And yeah, so now I've just in 2018, I was like, let me get some singing bowls and the crystal singing bowls. I started to fall in love with that because that healing worked really well for me. And so I have the bowls, and now I'm realizing like the more I just do it for myself, the more, number one, how much easier it'll be to introduce it to other people. Um, but also just how much better I'll be at doing it. So,
Do you, yeah, do you use your bowls while you teach yoga, like at the beginning or the end of your yoga class?
yes. So the bowls that I bought, I was like, this is a big deal because each bowl was like like $180. It was so expensive. But I'm like, I need to get more than one. So I got two. And um, I got a root chakra one because we live in such a fearful society. And it makes sense because we're fed a lot of misinformation. And now that I've spoken to a lot of like older people, I realize how much this, like the oldest generation here on earth, like how much they have been through as a collective. They've been put through so many scary things. And those things were real to them. So like just being told to hide under your desk when you're in the second grade because someone might bomb us, like that is going to stick with people. So I was like,
Mm-hmm.
let me get the root chakra so we can just get to a safe place, um, whether people know it or not. And then I got a heart chakra one
Mm-hmm.
because I was like, once we get to that root chakra, um, we need to start to connect to other people, right? And just start to see that we're all coming from the same space. We want to feel safe, we want to feel love. But sometimes our egos get in the way and tell us that we're not connected. So that was like my way of just trying to introduce it. People don't maybe, maybe they don't consciously know what I'm trying to do for them. Um, but if they can get into a relaxed state and just hear the vibrations, the water in our bodies pick up the tones, just like the guitar would pick up the tone of another
Mm-hmm.
instrument.
Like for Reiki, even, you don't have to believe in Reiki. Reiki will still work, right? Because it's the intention behind it and it's the energy behind it. So even if you don't believe that, listening to a root and heart chakra sound bowl during meditation or yoga will work, it doesn't matter because it's still going to work whether you believe in it or not. And I find that to be like so beautiful, and that's how we're going to start changing the world. And people don't have to believe in anything that they don't want to believe in or trust in, but you can still change the vibration of the space,
Mm.
change the vibration of the body just by intention and just by listening to a certain sound or a certain frequency. So that's how we're going to keep changing the world and keep stepping into love, like unity and love for every individual that we meditate with, that we provide a yoga class for, that we sing and do sound healing with. So, thank you so much for being here today and sharing your story. I am so excited for people to hear all the creative things that you do, and you blend them so well. You blend everything that you do so well.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much for just allowing me to share. Thank you so much. And thank you for what you do.
You're so sweet. Oh, man. Well, I hope you're back on the podcast again one day and we can keep chatting it up about your new adventures because I know it's never the end. You're going to keep learning and growing, and I am already in the future holding space for you to do that. So if anyone wants to contact Lexie, you can find her at Shanti Health and Wellness on Instagram, and then her website is shantihealthandwellness.net. So I'll put those in the description below.
Yeah. And obviously right now we can't really go anywhere, but I'm trying to do more online accommodations. So
Yes.
there's always an
Yes.
option.
If they when they start following you and seeing all the amazing things that you offer, are there any events in the future that you'd like to put together for us to keep an eye on?
I think I'm still like kind of cooking them up in my mind, but I would love to continue guiding people through their home practices, because I know that a lot of people who've never tried yoga before are doing it through Zoom or like online. So, yeah, that's basically my goal right now, is to help people find that sacred space in their home, um, and connect to it there.
Yeah, beautiful. And it sounds so simple, right? Like just have a sacred space and connect to it. So, yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Britt.
Thank you for tuning in today, and a very big thank you to Lexie for sharing her story and being vulnerable and open with us. It takes courage. It's not easy to share your story, but so thankful for her and all the work that she does for humanity and the healing path of everyone that she comes into contact with. So for more information, please check her out at Shanti Health and Wellness Instagram, and then shantihealthandwellness.net. Have a beautiful week, and if you like what you heard, please share and subscribe.